Welcome. We are glad you are here joining us on another exciting SM News podcast. Our show, it's always about the top lessons learned, Forrest, all in this week's past cyber news. We got a lot of stuff, cool stuff to talk about this week. By the way, this is the Reddit Silver Award winner, Forrest, right? Well, we have the top lessons learned in the week's cyber stories and cyber news. And if you like us, kindly smash that like button like Hulk smash. And if you like Forrest's soapboxes, then definitely subscribe.
Every now and again. I'm hoping I get time for one today.
You get fired up sometimes, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we do have this lovely, lovely, lovely threat briefing email. And we provide all the top linkies from the last week or so, all in this awesome curated list, all put together by us of the top stories. So we are SecurityMetrics. We try to help small to large size businesses with access to affordable, high quality, and simple to use data security, compliance, and network security tools. So with that in mind, here is our top stories. The bad guys, they are changing their tactics, Forrest.
As always, arms race perpetually.
We're going to talk about deepfakes, them hiding malware in GPUs, and they're also now selling bandwidth. Our next story is all about the best browser settings. If you care about privacy, then you definitely want to pay attention to that. And the bad guys, they're actually using copyright notices to phish people. Which is
the legal pressure, yeah.
And CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Agency, they have a list of bad practices, and they added something to the list. So we're going to share that with you as well. All up here next on the SecurityMetrics News. So, Forrest, the trends, the cyber attack trends, things are always changing in our world, and the bad guys are they're pivoting faster than ever to get around our defenses.
Yeah, it's like a game of Frogger, just perpetually shifting around.
Yeah, they just keep jumping. So what we thought we'd do is take a quick moment to briefly just recap some of these changes that have been happening in the world and what the bad guys are doing and how they're pivoting. About maybe 2 episodes ago, we talked about the exotic malware that's being used.
The different programming languages.
To get around us. Get around our defense system. So this time, though, it's all about the attackers quietly selling off victims' internet bandwidth. That was the headline that came up this past week.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is all of these internet sharing apps that a lot of organizations and businesses use. These are legit services like programs like Honeygain and PacketStream and NanoWire. And the bad guys are using these services now to generate passive income.
Yeah, it's very similar in some regards to cryptocurrency mining. So, you're donating essentially your bandwidth, or selling, I guess, in this instance, a portion of your pipe for other people to use. Some of them call them residential VPNs.
Yeah.
So it's a seemingly above board legitimate service, but like so many other things, as always, it gets ruined by the jerks. So
and what the bad guys are able to do is they're able to get it into your environment if it's not already there, and then stop you from noticing it being present in your environment. And that's where the bad stuff happens, because the threat actors can take control of your environment, use those resources, obfuscate stuff, and again, resell it, and make income off of these legit services that might be running in your environment. So a different trend line for bad guys.
Yeah, as far as compromises go, this is probably one of the best you could ask for.
Yeah, right?
I mean, they're stealing your bandwidth. So the real sneaky ones are going to do, just shave off enough that you're not really going to notice. And some electricity costs associated with additional routing, not much, but potentially could be a lot of overhead or a lot of headache to try and track down.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I'm thinking too. The how difficult, because it's already challenging enough for us to try to find crypto mining software in a client's environment, and now you're talking about proxyware generating revenue for the criminal. That just makes it even more challenging.
Yep.
So there's another thing happening. Lots of new trends going on. The bad guy is pivoting away from your usual attack vectors, and they're looking at things like the article that I caught my attention this week, Forrest, was deepfakes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we should explain to the audience what a deep fake is, because you may have seen this where somebody takes a video of like Tom Cruise and they are able to take his voice and put it on you, for example, which I think would be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
Be able to see you with Tom Cruise's voice. But what the bad guys are doing is more than that. They're taking, like, for example, your CEO, take his voice, imitate it convincingly with the same cadence of your voice, the same speaking cadence, the same pacing of your voice, and then try to do something like initiate a wire transfer. And in this example, 243,000 actually happened. So a CEO's voice was imitated by a cyber threat actor. But Forrest, what's happening is in the last 2 years, all these people are working from home. You have all this Zoom stuff, all these Skype meetings, just a wealth of audio and video data.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to these kinds of things, as always, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So a good approach would be to try to limit your public media exposure, which means, we're already kind of hosed on that front.
Right.
Yeah, far too much of a corpus that somebody could draw from. It's Photoshop on steroids. It's a relatively new thing, so a lot of people aren't used to the idea that somebody's voice can be completely faked, or video even. It's quite the rabbit hole.
And with all this machine learning stuff that's out there, the bad guys can very quickly find a tutorial or some sort of service. They can incorporate all that visual, that auditory data technology, try to put it onto somebody's face like a CEO, and then defeat any sort of security measures. And it goes beyond just deep fake with voice and audio, but it's also deep fake phishing. So you're talking about well-timed voicemails, that kind of stuff. A drastic increase, folks, of this type of cyber attack is a trend line that we're following.
Yeah, there are some companies out there that do try to identify these fakes. There are some potential artifacts that are left behind. But we're now in the information age, and that means information warfare. So
yeah, big time.
It's a brave new world.
All right, so there's other trends that we're following too, and this one caught my attention for us because we're talking about here demo code that is now out in the wild, and it's being sold on hacker forums. And specifically what we're talking about is the bad guys are hiding malware in AMD processors, in NVIDIA, in the graphics processing unit of NVIDIA cards. So this is some crazy stuff for us. We're talking about hiding malware, hiding malicious code inside these types of processors and getting away with it.
Yeah. It was, the more I read into it, the scarier it got. It affects not only AMD and NVIDIA, but also some Intel GPUs. Well, not GPUs, integrated
processors.
Yeah, and it's pretty scary. This thing's kind of been around for a number of years, just as kind of a proof of concept. There was a rootkit about 6 years ago for Linux demonstrating this kind of capability, but it's hard to say whether or not this is persistent. It sounds like it's doing a lot of operations in memory, so trying to get away from like your typical antivirus that's going to be scanning memory for malicious actions that are taking place. GPUs are just so powerful these days and can be programmed in a number of ways that to do whatever operations you want. So it's unclear if this is persistent, and like if this is in the firmware, like if it's once it's off, if it's gone, or if it's gonna be there once you reboot or reinstall your operating system or what have you.
And that's a challenge for the audience out there. Talk about a lesson learned. If the security solutions you have in your environment are not scanning your system RAM, then you might potentially open yourself up to these types of attacks. And again, this is a new trend line. The proof of concept was sold on a hacker forum, which is pretty phenomenal. It's something you need to be aware of and at least have it on your mindset. So there's other trends that we're following too, and this one caught my attention, Forrest. The disclosure on this new vulnerability affecting AMD processors. Have you been following this at all?
Yeah. Speculative execution seems to be the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So we're talking about here, the specific vulnerability is the transient execution of non-canonical accesses. I said that pretty good, didn't I?
Canonical? I don't know.
Canonical? Yeah. I thought I did pretty good on that. What this is referring to, though, is the processors can suffer from the Zen 2 and the Zen Plus processors can suffer from a meltdown-like vulnerability. But what the researchers came out with is he said the problem is actually far more reaching than that, is that you're talking about here, Forrest, you're talking about combining specific software sequences, and that is where the load happens, and you get data leakage all over the place. And without getting too much into the technical details about all this, AMD did put out a guide on how to mitigate this vulnerability, but it's not completely patched in any sense of the... because it requires software recoding to make this vulnerability go away.
Yeah, thankfully the researcher gave them a lot of lead time to work on a patch. So it does take a microcode update, similar to what you saw with Spectre and Meltdown and those types of things. So it is currently available. Definitely want to get around to patching it, but this was disclosed back in 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been almost a year that they've had to work on this. So pretty crazy stuff. I mean, you see a lot of these kinds of tricks to try and boost performance out of processors.
Yeah, right. That's where it comes.
Yeah, it just opens up the gate to all kinds of exploitation. I think the OpenBSD project kind of took the best approach, which was just completely disabling multi-threading. I mean, at that point, you're sacrificing performance for security, but I mean, their entire shtick is being the most secure by default operating system out there. It's convenience versus security. That's the endless, seesaw that we're always fighting, aren't we?
The challenge though for it's not just AMD that's being impacted by this. It's also Intel. It's any processor out there.
Yep.
If the bad guys know about it and they have the opportunity, they're going to try to pivot towards that opportunity. So again, we're talking about trends, new trends, big trends, things that are appearing on the horizon. And, summarizing all of this, if you guys recall, in the last month, we've talked again about the exotic code being used in malware that's getting around defense systems. Now we have these legit services that are being taken over by cyber criminals to generate passive income for them. We've talked a lot about the attacks that have been pivoting towards your APIs and these unsecure APIs and all that data scraping that's going on. If you guys recall, it was not just LinkedIn, but the recent T-Mobile breach. It's a bunch of companies, Capital One, all are getting their APIs scraped. We talked also today about malware being used to hide, or tools being used to hide malware in AMD processors and NVIDIA GPUs and so on. These Deepfakes attacks are happening. And the bottom line, the takeaway here, folks, is the bad guys are adapting faster than ever, Forrest, and they're using these new techniques to try to get around current defense systems.
Yeah. The amount of creativity being leveraged here is astounding. It's like I said before, ever evolving arms race.
It never stops. All right, folks, here we are with our top stories. And our top stories this week, we always want to try to put out some information out there how you can get control of your life on the internet, maybe get a little bit more privacy back in your world. I know this is a big area that you like to focus on and help people out with.
Yeah, most definitely.
So today we thought we'd talk about security awareness and specifically around browser settings. Safari, Chrome, Edge, DuckDuckGo, I mean, whatever you use, guys, right? There's tons of them out there.
Oh, yeah.
So Forrest, where do we start with this?
It's very difficult. I mean, there is so much that you can do in a browser, and there's so much attack surface and fingerprinting capability. I mean, it's an endless rabbit hole. It gets very dark very quickly the longer you look. It's that old Nietzsche. You stare long into the abyss, and it starts to stare back into you.
So if you use a program like Chrome, for example, and if that is your primary browser, Chrome is pretty cool. It can do a lot of blocking of third-party cookies. You could do that under settings, under privacy and security, and so on. But what's neat about Chrome is the number of extensions out there and trying to sort through, Forrest, all of the extensions they have available. We put up our top 4 up on the list right now. You got Cookies Auto Delete, uBlock Origin, Privacy Badger, and HTTPS Everywhere. They're probably your top 4, but you always got to do your due diligence. If you're going to go out there and just put random extensions in your browser, that could open you up to bad things.
Yeah, definitely. Community vetted solutions are very important. Big shout out to the EFF for putting out Privacy Badger and also HTTPS Everywhere. Those guys are rock stars.
Love them.
Absolutely love them. I actually got a tour of their offices in San Francisco. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's
anyway,
cool.
So one thing to be aware of with Chrome in particular is, it is Google. It's giving them all kinds of fun information. So
sell your soul, Forrest.
My first recommendation would be, try to break the Chrome browser monoculture if at all possible. But that's again, convenience versus security kind of thing.
Well, we're going to give you guys some options here too in just a minute. If you are not a fan of Chrome or Safari or any of those other browsers out there, the browser wars coming up tonight on Netflix. But we are going to actually we're going to talk about some of the other browsers too. So Safari, I know a lot of people love Safari. They've got that intelligent tracking prevention tool, and that is actually running by default as I understand it. But you can actually go in there and you can manually delete your cookies. They don't give you a lot of options in there. You can remove all the cookies and so on, but you got to do a lot of that manual legwork to make Safari happy for you.
I do appreciate the steps that Apple is taking to try and make things a little bit more private by default. They're pushing the envelope as far as industry standards. So big ups to them as well.
So there's two extensions you should be concerned about or think about, and that is AdGuard for Safari and Ghostery Lite. We'll talk more about Ghostery. I said Ghosterly. I meant Ghostery Lite in just a minute. All right. Now there's other browsers out there. There's Edge, which you can do some settings on. There's about 3 different settings, if I recall. It's basic, balanced, and strict. Strict will absolutely interfere with your ability to navigate certain websites. Basic, on the other hand, that basic setting in Edge will help block the crypto mining stuff and fingerprinting. Firefox I know a lot of people love Firefox out there, and they have they have basically 3 options as well. You have the standard setting, you have the strict, and the custom. And again, the same thing. Strict, it's potentially break a few websites, but you gotta balance that.
Most definitely, and you can do multiple profiles in any of these browsers. So if you find that doing strict by default is breaking stuff, you can switch to a different profile and try something a little bit lighter that may actually let the website work for you. Yeah. And another big thing for Firefox, I like to mention, is Firefox Focus. It's essentially kind of permanent private browsing. It doesn't store anything across sessions. It's all of your cookies get deleted automatically. Makes it really easy if you're just generally browsing to try and get a little bit more of that privacy back. However, again, the convenience, it doesn't keep cookies. So if you sign into a website, it's not going to keep it. So,
oh man. And Forrest, Brave, we got to talk about being Brave for a moment. I know you're a huge Brave fan. It has that built-in Tor private browsing mode. Do you want to get on your soapbox for a minute about Tor?
I think, man, Tor has been light years ahead of the privacy game. So many of these features that you're seeing, third-party tracking, that sort of stuff, is blocked by default. I mean, they're really stepped up the privacy game, and it also gives you the biggest anonymity set. So if you're trying to blend in with a crowd and not be unique, having all this stuff ready to go out of the box is going to be the best way to do it.
Yeah, and the fact that they give you that built-in VPN is so helpful for so many users. If you're on iOS, for example, with Brave. Beyond all that, there's a lot of other fine-tuning that you can do, fine-tuning settings inside Brave that you might want to consider using. So if you've never used it before, definitely take it for a whirl. Take it out for a spin and see if you like it. So we got to talk about one other thing, too, Forrest, and that is all the other options out there. Man, there are so many. I mean, it feels like we're in the age of unbelievable options and choices, Forrest, for browsers.
Information overload, that's for sure.
But how do you pick which is good? I mean, for example, I had a friend the other day said, I want to use Dolphin browser. And for a lot of people are like, what is Dolphin? I go, well, hold on a minute. You might want to consider that it's owned by a Chinese gaming company, and I don't know how safe and secure it is when it's got an owner that may not have your best interest in mind. So that's the challenge, I think, for a lot of people. There is Ghostery, though. We did mention that browser extension out there, but they have their own browser, standalone browser that a lot of people like. What's cool about Ghostery is, I know you're an open source kind of guy. Standalone browser. They also have the extension. Ghostery, I'll get it right, I promise you folks. It can block third-party tracking scripts. It's got a script library, which is really cool. It'll actually identify and update itself on new tracking scripts. And then it allows you to do whitelisting, which we're a huge fan of. If there's a certain website that you know should not be allowed or should be allowed, you can block and whitelist. So it's pretty cool.
Ghostery is kind of interesting in that it had a lot shadier past. It sounds like they may have improved their act. They used to have these allowed trackers, kind of we're okay with these companies, doing analytics or what have you.
But not these.
But it sounds like, since they've open sourced it, they're stepping up their game a bit. One thing that I do like to mention is a great resource for all this stuff is privacytools.io. They go through and they have some pretty strict criteria as far as what they will recommend or not. So they do a lot of the heavy lifting of evaluating these different options. That way, you can just go there and be like, okay, what do you recommend for a browser? What do you recommend for messaging application, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good way to go. I know a lot of people love DuckDuckGo. A couple of years ago, it was a big thing. DuckDuckGo does a lot of advertising here in Utah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is I see the billboards all the time.
All over the place.
U.S.-based company. They don't collect your data. They don't track the data you search. There's also Puffin, which is another browser a lot of people like. But you got to remember with Puffin is they encrypt. They utilize encrypted cloud servers. So your data is sent up to their cloud server. It's then processed and then, sent back to you. So you got to remember, though, that's the challenge, right? I mean, if you're sending your data to the cloud and it's being rendered in the cloud, it doesn't may not give you the most secure takeaway from that. So that's Puffin. And then I know we've been really recommending Exodus Privacy. Do you want to take a quick moment for us to talk about that?
Yeah. Exodus is really interesting in that they do evaluations of Android applications, and they will identify any known tracking libraries in the APK. And they also will notify you of some shady permissions. It's like, okay, this seems a bit broad. And it's a wonderful site that you can submit applications to be evaluated. They have a pretty good base of different applications already. I absolutely love checking out Exodus before installing any sort of application.
Yeah, it's a good pathway to take. If you want to do your own threat risk assessment before you install an app, with Exodus, you install the app and then run Exodus, and it'll tell you some of the trackers. But you can also run Exodus from a browser too, which is a very helpful activity. So we got to talk about one other thing, Forrest, before we get on the top story stuff here, and that is all the DMCA copyright notifications. And a lot of these scammers, man, they're just going crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Did you get any notifications from the Digital Millennium Copyright Act?
I did not. But it follows the same trend that you see with like these fake IRS notifications, right? So
right.
I mean, these phishers, these scammers really like to leverage legal threats. My favorite was probably the fake IRS. You'll be placed under the rest text message.
Right.
Oh man, just the poor wording. But I mean, these legal threats are particularly scary, especially when it comes to like a company or even individuals. I mean, if somebody has a history of legal trouble, they're going to be a lot more likely to, and try and nip that in the bud and fall for it.
But what's challenging for those of you that are listening is your email security solution may be filtered that it allows all of these legal threats to go right through. And that's where I'm getting so many of friends and coworkers that are saying, I just got this copyright notification, but I didn't do anything wrong. And in the copyright notification, what the scammers are doing is they're putting a Google Drive link. Oh, click here to see which file, what was the evidence that you did with the copyright violation. So then they click on the Google link, the Google Drive link, and the next thing you know is they've been popped. Their they've been scammed. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got to be careful of this, folks. Tell your people that you work with, if they get a copyright notification, run it by legal. Don't click on anything in there.
Yeah, most definitely. I just got a friend who sent me a message just this morning. There was a text message, it was a voice phishing saying that they were from a court, and if you don't respond, that a warrant will be put out for your arrest. So they definitely are really pushing on the legal aspect.
That's
of things.
tough, man. That's tough, because then you're like, oh, I better call it, man. What kind of warrant do I have out for my arrest?
Yep.
All right. Now, another thing that's been going on right now, and Microsoft's been all over this in the last 2 weeks or so, is there's a lot of phishing attacks out there that are using open redirects. I think, Forrest, we've got to explain to the audience what is an open redirect.
Yeah. So it you get a link that goes to a seemingly legitimate website. Let's say you get an email saying you need to follow this Zoom link, but it has the ability to specify a destination, right? And then they go and they replace that destination with their own domain. So you look at the link and it's like, oh, this goes to Zoom. I know this domain. This is totally fine.
Better click on it.
Yep. And you click on it and then it redirects you. And it's like, oh, you need to sign in first. Yeah. And that's where they phish your credentials.
And they're phishing using CAPTCHAs. So you guys know those CAPTCHAs where you gotta, hey, how many taxis are in this picture, right? Or how many traffic lights are in this picture? Well, that is the CAPTCHA. And then once you click on that CAPTCHA, then it takes you to the area where it's actually going to capture your credentials. So you're going to get this fake error message after you clicked on I am not a robot. It's going to prompt you to re-enter your password, and then your credentials get compromised. So what we'll do is we'll have our editor here put up two screenshots here. The first one you're going to see is of the actual fake Zoom invitation, and then the second shot here is of the actual path, the data flow path here. Of you see the phishing email gets sent, you get the user gets enticed to click on it. They have to display the CAPTCHA. They have to click on I am not a robot, and then the fake error message to enter their credentials. So that's how it happens, folks. That quick.
Yeah, the biggest frustration with a lot of these phishing things, phishing is a solved problem. I mean, there's so many ways to try and combat it. You can manually check what domain you're on, but that requires knowledge and forethought. And, you can't rely on a person to implement a manual process. No you can try and use a password manager that only works for a specific domain. It'll only autofill your credentials when you're on that site. Yeah. But again, that leaves a bit to be desired. My biggest thing is if you're a developer, please implement universal second factor or WebAuthn. Like this was a solved issue 4 years ago. We can nip it in the bud. We just, unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't really care or aren't going to bother doing that until it's too late.
But Forrest, I have a great segue now. You mentioned single-factor authentication.
Yep.
Guess what CISA did? That is CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, the United States of America. They have a bad practice list, Forrest, and they put up their number 3, which is SFA. So that's a great segue, man.
Yep.
How many companies don't do single-factor or don't do multi-factor authentication?
The vast majority, I would say.
It's terrible,
I mean, I like to see the amount of adoption that's happening with, at least a second factor. I mean, a lot of them are doing it wrong with SMS. You just open yourself up to SIM swaps and things like that. But it's on the rise. But I mean, how many stories do we do that could have been prevented
because of this?
Yeah, because of
how fired up I am on
factor.
this?
Yeah, like it's you have phishing, you have credential stuffing attacks, password sprays, like all this stuff could be mitigated just by having a second factor.
Yeah.
It's man, please, again, developers, please, best practice. It's 2021.
Make it happen.
Yeah, let's get this in gear.
Yeah, man, it's bad. So we'll include the link to CISA and to the bad practices stuff. But man, it is it's pretty cool. I like their list for us. I wish they'd update it more often. It's such a great primer if you are new to cybersecurity or you're somebody that's like, I don't even know where to start. This list, and they're only on number 3, so they got a lot more to add. All right, folks, it's a pretty good list. All right, so time for some gaslighting before we drop the show here and get out of here, Forrest. Man, I want to hear what the people in the audience think, man. Leave some comments on this story because Samsung has a TV block feature. They can disable TVs anywhere in the world, guys. How fired up do you get on that, Forrest? Man?
Okay. So I didn't really have a decent opportunity to fully vent about TVs on the last round.
Right.
That one was we were talking about rubber duckies and remote keystroke injection and things like that. But the TVs themselves it really grinds my gears. Oh man, it is nearly impossible to get a dumb TV these days.
You can't find one.
No. So, man,
unless you want to go back,
start?
you want to go like on those sites and get like a CRT to run your Nintendo NES, dude. All right, if you can do that, you're my hero.
Oh
man.
yeah, get the ultra high refresh rate and low latency.
But before you jump off that cliff, I want the people in the audience to know. So in South Africa, they had a bunch of riots, all right, and they went after the Samsung warehouse. They went after the LG warehouse, pillaged. I love being able to say the word pillage for us. Not often in work.
Yeah. Modern day pirates.
They pillaged the warehouse, matey. And they got all the Samsung televisions. But what they didn't know was Samsung has the ability to do this remote disable right from the vendor. And I kind of like that at first. Please don't get upset here, right, man? Calm down. But I kind of like this feature to be able to remotely disable the television, so people that are trying to steal, they can't get they can't take it over. But there is a theoretical attack scenario.
Oh yeah.
And what happens if the threat actor compromises Samsung servers or LG servers and completely shuts down all these TVs?
Yeah. That's a denial of service that is.
Right, that's a real denial of service.
Oh man, that'll get people real fired up real quick. I mean, look at the example of Sonos. With their recycle mode that would brick a device and how much backlash there was for that. But I mean, TVs on the whole are okay. This is going to be a soapbox moment. I mean, nowadays you get advertisements directly in your user interface on your TV.
Oh, they love those Rokus.
They have automatic content recognition where it will analyze things that you're watching and then send it back to them so that they can build an advertising profile based on that information.
Advertising identifiers.
It's a dark pattern. Yeah, you can opt out of it, but the default is opt in. So thanks again for that.
You forgot to mention the remotes. My Roku has a microphone.
Yeah. That's another listening device, as if smart speakers weren't enough already.
Right.
And then there's also the case where people try and circumvent these things by not connecting it to the internet. They're like, oh, I won't put it on my Wi-Fi, therefore it won't be able to do all this stuff. Except again, Samsung has implemented this thing where it will automatically connect to an open wireless network and do its telemetry that way. So even if you don't set it up, it's still doing these things. Yeah. Not only that, but I think it was Huawei was actually exploring implementing 5G chips into the television directly. So it's going to have its own cellular connection that even if there's no open wireless around, that you don't connect it to the internet, it can still phone home using a cell phone connection. It is nutty. I mean, the remote bricking of the TVs in and of itself is pretty problematic. I don't see this being an effective mitigation against theft. It's just going to be affecting people downstream. So somebody steals a TV, they're gonna then turn around and pawn it off. It can be reversed with a proof of purchase. You don't think that a thief is gonna try and Photoshop a receipt? The other part of me that gets super dystopian is at what point do we start getting subscription based TVs? Oh, I didn't pay for this, so now my TV is remotely bricked.
Wow.
I mean,
dystopian view of the future, Forrest. I am really just. It's dark right now. This show has just gone super dark.
I have no faith in corporations not trying to seek out new profit models. I mean, let's take HDCP for example, the copy protection on high def content, right?
Yeah.
I get playback errors on that all the time, even though I have a completely legitimate television, a completely legitimate streaming device. It just gives me all kinds of guff. And so the funny thing is the pirates never have to worry about that. All that stuff is stripped out. So all it's doing is affecting legitimate customers. So I definitely see the remote bricking kind of going down this same path. Like it's not gonna stop the criminals. It's only going to impact, legitimate users.
It's a dangerous pathway, and of course, we could probably let you go on for another 2 hours, man. But we got to get the show out of this dark hole that you've pitched for us all, man.
It was a soapbox moment, and that was built up over 2 episodes. So.
T-Mobile CEO, they interviewed him this week. He said, "Oh, this data breach. Woe is me and the company. It's humbling, Forrest. We are committed to security. Only after the 6th breach, we're now finally committed to security." But they did hire Mandiant. They did hire KPMG as consultants. But what the article that really got me, Forrest, was I think it was the Washington Post, where they actually interviewed. I can't believe they found this guy. They interviewed the hacker that was behind this guy named John Brin. He's an American in Turkey.
Yeah, the sheer hubris of doing an interview with your name,
right? And you're an American in Turkey, Forrest.
Yeah.
All right. So the way the guy got into T-Mobile's network is he pivoted through a Washington State data center that T-Mobile had, and he gained access to a bunch of credentials for about 100 different servers on T-Mobile's network. And then basically was able to go from there and pivot and look around for an unprotected router, and then start scraping all this information out on 54 million customers. All right. So he said that, and this is the part for us that caught my attention. The company's security is awful.
Yeah.
All right. And you kind of know that already. I mean, 5-6 breaches into this. Yeah. It's got to be kind of awful. But that kind of, like you said, the hubris of it, this guy actually giving his name, the fact that he is an American, the fact that he is in another country, explaining exactly his tactics and his maneuvers, that caught my attention.
It's a pretty crazy story. And they may be hiring Mandiant. Awesome. That's great first step. The problem is, what actions are going to be taken on the reports that Mandiant generates? They're going to be able to point out all their flaws and say, here's where you're completely lacking.
Now you got to take action. You got to take steps. That's always seems to be the hardest part for anybody, for any client. You tell them exactly what's going on. This is some of the vulnerabilities, some of the risks, some of the threats that we found in your environment. Then being able to prioritize those and actually take an action plan that makes sense to try to solve and fix and correct some of this stuff. And for how big of a footprint, T-Mobile's footprint, Forrest, is gigantic.
Yeah.
All right. That's a lot of work on their end. And they have to spend a lot of time making really good TV commercials, and they've got all that money and time invested in sponsoring stadiums. So that takes a lot of their focus. So the most prominent data breaches in the news. I know a lot of people love this segment. And the fact is, there's a lot of breaches out there. And to pick just one to highlight for all of you, it's a little bit of a challenge. I do want to highlight this one, and this one is important because it's called Eskyfun. Anytime that you have a company named Eskyfun, you know they're going to be fun. It's a Chinese mobile gaming firm. They had a data breach over 1 million gamers. So if you are a gamer out there and you play any of their big games, their big games, Forrest, are Rainbow Story. Do you play Rainbow Story?
No.
You look like a Rainbow Story fantasy kind of guy, but I guess not.
All the games I play are nearly a decade old and dirt cheap.
To the internet.
It's
not connected to the internet, man. If you play SimCity 2000, all right, you might be in Forest Camp here. Okay. Metamorph M is another game that got caught up in this breach. And Dynasty Heroes, Legends of Samok. All right, if you play that game. So 134 gigabytes of data. Why is this important, folks? IP address, IMEI number on the phones, your device model number, Wi-Fi, cellular, how are you connecting? The bottom line is this, folks. If you play any of those 3 games, you need to be aware of it. You need to take some steps to protect yourself because it's a lot of data being exposed. All right? So that is our presentation for the week. We hope you had a good time. I know we did. It's always fun talking to you guys. And please subscribe. Please connect with us online. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. We do have that threat briefing email. It's a curated list of all the top links that come out every week.
Yeah, drinking from the fire hose on that one. It's
it's
a
good,
lot
though.
of information, and all of it is something's going to be relevant in there for you. That's
completely free. That's for sure. And again, I'm Forrest. I'm not. I'm Heff. I want to be Forrest, guys.
I'm Heff.
You guys have a great time. Take care.
Later.